AB 110 is our resources trailer bill.
Yes, this is the Resources Omnibus Trailer Bill that implements various provisions of the 15-16 Budget Act. Just a few of the highlights. First of all, there's provisions that strengthen the state's underground injection control program by formalizing the Water Board's role in aquifer exemption and is establishing additional resources and oversight at the Division of Oil and Gas and Geothermal Regulation. This bill also establishes a 3-person independent review panel to review and make recommendations to improve our Department of Toxic Substances Control hazardous waste permitting program, and also makes other changes related to the fiscal management and also establishes at that department and establishes an environmental justice ombudsman at the department. There's also some technical changes related to the state fire marshal's responsibilities related to the management of illegal fireworks, and it also clarifies the payments in lieu of taxes made to counties for state wildlife management areas are discretionary.
Thank you, Ms. Bosler. Senator Wolk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have handed out 2 sheets to you about something called Payment in Lieu of Taxes, PILT, which affects many of your counties, and has over the past 10 years. First, just some general comments about the resources budget. There's a tremendous amount of extraordinary goodwill by the voters in terms of Prop 1, Prop 1E, that will be a key part of this budget and is really something to be very, very pleased about in terms of being in the middle of the drought, and which may continue, and lots of these projects that your local communities are ready to move forward to increase the savings of water and the more efficient use of water. But there is an issue here that I wanted to raise, and I beg the committee's indulgence. This is something called Payment in Lieu of Taxes, called PILT. And what I've handed out are 2 sheets. One is the senators whose counties are directly affected this year in 2015, and the other is a chart of monies that have been owed to the counties since 1998. This is money that payment in lieu of taxes, when the state comes in to purchase lands using bond funds or other funds to create conservation areas or some public land, the local communities, the counties to whom the state goes to talk about and to request and to inform and to request participation in this land purchasing, counties are generally reluctant because it means taking the land off the tax roll. So promises are made by the state to the county and have been since 1998. That's the earliest year I know of because I was on a board of supervisors where the Ola Basin Foundation, the Ola Basin Wildlife Area was formed, 16,000 acres, and a promise was made to replace the lost taxes. Fast forward a little bit to 2002, there's no general fund. This all comes out of general fund. So there is no, well, scratch that for a moment. I'll go back to that. Go to 2002, and for the next 10 years, as you can see on the chart, longer than 10 years, the budget was truly in crisis. And there were many things cut, and this was, in my view, appropriately deferred. So that amounts to about $7.7 million. The conference committee, actually, let's first start with the governor, who at the beginning of this year acknowledged that PILT funding should be given to the counties concerned, and has put, and I assume that's still in the budget, and I hope it will not be vetoed, $600,000+. However, It was accompanied with a suggestion, a request, a demand, that the law that controls this should be changed. The conference committee, the budget subcommittee and the conference committee suggested paying the $7.7 million that it is in arrear back, and not to change the law, to suddenly make those payments not mandatory any longer, but they may be dispensed with. I bring this forward. It's not going to stop the budget. It is, in my view, a broken promise. It is a broken pledge to counties that have been very good partners. And in my view, it's short-sighted because we have Proposition 1 in front of us, and we have Prop 1E in front of us, and there will be land purchases being made, and there will be relationships with counties that need to occur, and there will probably be payment in lieu of taxes that will need to occur. So I would just suggest that in Section 1, the department, the administration, the finance department, and the governor came forward with, again, this change in the law. So there will be a payment this year, and everyone is very appreciative of that. There will not be a payment for those in arrears, the promises that have been made. But the real poke in the eye is that the law, you want to change it. You want to change the requirement that you owe to the counties that promise. And I just think that's short-sighted, and I just don't think it's an appropriate way to treat those who have been good partners. So I just had to make that statement. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for the indulgence.
Thank you, Senator Wolk. Thank you, Senator Wolk. And just to direct committee members to page 15 of this trailer bill, which is the section to which Senator Wolk was referring under Section 1. Starting on line 6, you'll see that the word shall has been changed to may. And again, on line 9, the department may, where it had previously read shall. And that is the issue that Senator Wolk has raised.
I'd like to
yes, Ms. Bossler, certainly, if you could respond.
No, I just wanted to give a little bit of context about why we are where we are today. I think decisions were made well before this administration that these payments were, in fact, discretionary and were suspended from as far back as 2002 because of budget difficulties. This administration this year is proposing to fund and to fund going forward as long as funds are available. I think once the state does go into another recession or there are additional shortfalls in revenues, I think it's very important that the state have the ability to manage through those and not accrue large liabilities, such as we have done in the area of mandates. And that's why this budget does reflect $765 million to counties and cities for mandates that are owed from as far back as 2004. It's been very important to the governor to continue to pay off the state's debts. And I think in this case, there is not an interest in accruing additional debts going forward when there's been there has been a longstanding precedent for not funding this expense. We do understand the issue of fairness, and that was why the money is built in and was built in the January budget. I think counties are good partners when it comes to conservation of important lands, working lands, and other lands that are purchased by the state for conservation purposes. And we want to continue that relationship going forward. And that's why there is the acknowledgement that that is an important funding source to backfill for those counties that are impacted.
Thank you, Ms. Bosler. Senator Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I couldn't have said it more forcefully than Senator Walk, so I'll let that stand. I will only say that I feel as strongly as she does about it. And I intend to go a little further. If this is the way it's going to be left, may instead of shall, there is no promise. There is no intent to keep a promise, except for 1 year. Whoopee. And I am going to work very vigilantly to stop any such property transfers to the state of California for wildlife areas or whatever, until such time as the state will keep its promise to those counties regarding their lost property taxes. We should not cooperate, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm speaking to people who live in the counties of California, with the state in our good faith to help preserve fish and wildlife and lands and open space without the state's help and support. And the same holds true for the Williamson Act.
Thank you, Senator Nielsen. Senator Pavley.
I believe I'm on the right item. It was part of the opening comments from Ms. Bosler. I just wanted to comment on the underground injection control program, which was subject of some of the discussion after it left the budget conference committee and negotiations and trade-offs. First, just an overview of the level of the challenge here. The Federal Environmental Protection Agency informed us that 2,500 wastewater wells, oil waste, not really from fracking, but traditional oil drilling, were illegally placed in protected aquifers, non-exempt aquifers under the Safe Drinking Water Act. They had not been inspected. We're concerned about contamination. There was an agreement signed between EPA and DOGGR, Division of Oil and Gas and Geothermal Recovery, that all these wells that are illegally put in protected aquifers would be inspected. They're starting with the highest priority wells that are in areas where there's water that could be used for drinking water, either now or in the future, or agricultural purposes, both for beneficial uses. They have a timetable that's, one could say, you know, we wish it was a lot faster. Starting in October is one timeline, but they have all the way through February of 2017 to investigate these wells. 23 wells have been shut down, 2 of those reopened, and the list goes on. The State Water Board, for the first time, is very engaged in this process along with DOGGR. As this went through, I, of course, wanted some consequences about not meeting that February deadline. There has to be consequences. In fact, I thought if you had a deadline, boy, the oil company and everyone else would want to make sure that the State Water Board and DOGGR investigated all those lines. There's really no consequences on not meeting the deadline. What this part of the budget does is, add some additional PYs for DOGGR, and I think 8 for the State Water Board to hopefully be able to handle this really significant problem. And I should add that since the 2,500 wells, we've found 3,600 cyclic steam injection problem wells that have similar concerns, not as high a level as the other one. Ongoing problem of no one minding the store at DOGGR for years. People have been fired over the periods of time. Recently, Mark Neckedem resigned his Department of Conservation. They're getting ready to hire a new person. We have problems, and I'm concerned about protecting our water supply. So what we're left with here is a reporting period, additional PYs. So every 6 months, we're reporting on how they're doing and reviewing and analyzing the wastewater wells and potential contamination of groundwater basins during a drought. But what's a little perplexing to me is the February date comes and goes and there's no consequences. So I'm going to bring it up because people that'll be around really need to provide that legislative oversight that this matters, timeliness matters. We can't gamble on our groundwater basins. So the last part of this negotiation was that in January of 2018, 10 months after it, there would be a committee formed to look at Dogger's operations. I think we could be a little stronger than this because too much is at stake. This is a step in the right direction. I appreciate the people who negotiated under difficult circumstances, the best oversight that they could provide. So I, for one, will use my chairmanship of my water committee in the next year and a half to continue to monitor this. But this is critically important, and I think it's important that the public knows this. I'll be supporting this as a first step, but this is shouldn't be the last step.
Thank you, Senator Pavley. I know you've invested a lot of time and energy in your committee to protect the water supply of Californians, in particular in parts of the state where water is most challenged. And Ms. Boswell, I wanted to ask if you could respond in terms of where we are with regard to these EPA deadlines, and how close are we, or potentially at risk, of losing our authority? Might we be usurped by EPA at some point? And if you could also respond to Senator Pavley's concern of lack of consequences.
This proposal is all about complying with the US EPA's directives, and a work plan has been put together to work towards those goals. They include lasting transparency measures, such as a searchable database that will also be implemented over the next couple of years that will not just help with the compliance of the current US EPA order, but will provide the lasting transparency that the administration is committed to in this program. In terms of consequences about deadlines, our goal is to meet those deadlines, and that is the work plan that has been laid out, and the work will commence as soon as the budget resources are enacted. I think the water board role is a very new role for the state, and it's a very important role related to the exempt aquifers, and it's something that we are committed to in terms of even further improving the oversight of these wells and ensuring the health and safety of our water aquifers, which are so precious, obviously.
Thank you. Colleagues, Senator Roth, and then I want to go back to the property in lieu tax for just a moment, but Senator Roth, we'll move on to you.
Mr. Chair, I think my colleague, Mr. Senator Stone, has his hand up first. So.
Thank you.
Is that true?
Thank you, Senator Roth.
Okay, go right ahead.
I agree. I want to talk about the in lieu fees again, and I want to associate my comments with Senator Wolk. I appreciated all of her comments. Thank you for the spreadsheet. Having served as a county supervisor for 10 years and being an instrumental part of our habitat conservation plan, we have a very ambitious goal of acquiring 153,000 acres in our county. And I can tell you, with the partnership of the state of California, the federal government, developers that pay a habitat fee, we've acquired over 45,000 acres of critical habitat. And of course, budgets have been strained because if you don't have development, you don't get the developmental fees, which means you don't get that extra money to buy habitat. Has been a challenge. And I just want to say that I agree with Senator Wolk that, promises made should be kept. This is a part of the budget process that the Riverside Conservation Agency utilizes in their forecasts of what they can buy and what they can't buy in the future. And if you look at the spreadsheet that Senator Wolk provided, you'll see that Riverside County is one of the largest beneficiaries of this in lieu money. And we have obviously the most at stake if that is not maintained. So I associate my comments, appreciate Senator Wolk bringing it up. I hope that we can keep the promises. It's these type of issues that make municipalities, counties and cities very nervous at budget time because we don't know what's going to be taken away from us.
Thank you, Senator. So, Senator Roth, is your question on this point? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just a little confused, so I just want to make sure I understand. So in looking at this spreadsheet that my colleague, Senator Walk, provided, and roughly $1.5 million totaled up for the county of Riverside, is the administration's proposal that the $1.5 million be erased? And to the extent there are monies due in the future, the administration will consider paying them? Is that what I understand? And then I have a follow-up question well, regardless of what the answer is, but certainly if it's yes.
The administration is committed to funding this going for the budget year and going forward. The monies on this spreadsheet are those that accrued, I think, as far back as 2002, when there was a decision by a prior administration that these were discretionary expenditures, and there was a decision point in every budget about whether they were funded or not. This language and commitment for ongoing funding is to start afresh with a clear statute and a clear expectation that this administration will fund this going forward as long as there are overall budgetary resources to do that. But when we do go into the next recession, I think it's important, the administration thinks it's important to make sure we have the flexibility to manage through that.
Well, did the counties understand that these payments were to be made to them, but were merely suspended due to budgetary constraints?
I don't have all the information about how they were construed at that time. This was a long-standing decision from as far back as 2002, where the payments were not made by the administration or by the legislature in their annual budget acts.
Do we know whether these monies are being carried on the books of?
They are not being carried on the wall of debt or on the state debts.
Well, I assume they're not being carried on our wall of debt, but do you know whether or not the monies are being carried on the books of the counties involved, for example?
I do not have that information.
I guess one of my concerns is we suspend things all the time up here, whether it's a mandate or we defer payments to education. Why would we not take these accrued sums, and if there's a budgetary problem that the administration believes justifies it, why are we not simply continuing to defer payment or suspending payment or even terminating it on a prospective basis where everybody understands what the rule is, but to take money that has been allowed to apparently accrue over 14 or 15 years and then simply take an eraser and erase it on the books, whether it's our books or the county books, seems a bit extreme to me.
So I think the difference of opinion on this issue is that the administration's interpretation on this issue is that those monies were owed subject to appropriation. And in each of those years, an appropriation was not made for that purpose. So I think the difference is that the administration believes that those monies are not owed because the appropriation was not made, and the counties continue to maintain that they are owed the money. So that is really the distinction.
Well, the Department of Fish and Wildlife must have been keeping book on this, or we wouldn't have the data in front of us. So I'm just concerned that we have, a State Department that's keeping records of monies that somebody thinks are owed to counties that we think apparently in prior administrations believe they couldn't pay, but were allowed to remain, and all of a sudden we're going to take the big K through 12 eraser out and simply erase the ledger, and that's a bit of concern to me. I mean, I hate to be parochial, but it's $1.562 million for the county of Riverside. I guess I don't, that's a rhetorical question, Mr. Chair, so I will keep my lips shut and stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Roth. I'm just going to follow up on this briefly. San Francisco County, not surprisingly, does not have a dog in this race, so to speak, but this does rub my sense of justice the wrong way. And so I'm going to stand with my colleagues here. The outstanding amount is about $8 million, I understand. This is a one-time debt. It's one-time money. This has no out-year impact, and it would attend to, as many of my colleagues have already stated, promises made. I would like to think, in the size of our budget, we've got a one-time expenditure affordable to attend to this. So that's question A, and clearly the answer to that question right now is no. But question B then addresses Senator Nielsen's suggestion that he's going to suggest to his counties, do not participate in allowing the state to acquire land for wildlife management. That's not a good thing, and I understand exactly why he would do it. If I were in your situation, I'd do the same. So my question then, prospectively, is there not a way for us to deal with the potential interaction with the county for the acquisition of land for wildlife management, that the county says we're prepared to move forward on X number of acres? We'd like confirmation that there will be a payment in lieu of taxes. That the state then says yes or no, and if the county hears the answer no, then I guess the deal's off. But we could just take it project by project, deal by deal. What would be the opposition to something like that?
Well, first of all, this administration is committed to funding this going forward, which is why the money for the payment in lieu of taxes is built in the budget year, and it's built in every one of those out years that we've been looking at since January. So our commitment is to pay this. The concern is in locking in a new liability to the state. This is something that the administration does not support. We're working very hard to pay down the liabilities that have built up over the past decade. And this is one where there's a difference of opinion about whether there was a liability. We maintain that it was always subject to appropriation by the legislature. Monies were not appropriated for several years, which has accrued the $7.88 million estimated liability. Our proposal is to fund PILT going forward in the budget year and throughout the multi-year, and make it clear in statute that this is a permissive, subject to appropriation type of expenditure, so that we don't accrue additional liabilities in the future if we are in such difficult circumstances that we have to make many different difficult decisions to reduce programs across the board.
So if I hear your comments correctly, your understanding of the budget bill is that, the trailer bill is that for the budget year and how many years going forward, that this will be, though it is permissive, your intent, or it is law that you shall? Because I'm looking at the language that now says may.
It is our intent to fund it, and it is built into our multi-year appropriation through 2018.
Why would the trailer bill not say then for years 15, 16, 17, 18, 18, 19, or however far out you want to go?
The concern is creating a new liability that the administration maintains does not exist currently, so that every year there is a discretion about whether to fund it or not, as
well, how about
opposed to
starting
creating
just
a
with
new...
15, 16? We shall for 15, 16 and take it.
The concern is really going forward, and not in 15, 16 or 16, 17. We don't predict a recession in either of those years, but going forward, if there is a return to the difficult times where there are widespread reductions across all of the state budget, that this is an area where the state would not have to accrue a new liability.
I do understand that, but again, if the intent is, and you're telling us very clearly, you have every intention and plan to do so, again, without any potential downturn in the out years, that at least for the budget year, have shall and leave it to May beyond that, and we'll revisit it a year from now. So we take it year by year. Why would we not do that?
I think that the reality is that we are doing that. I mean, we are, the money is built in, the money will be distributed for the budget year.
And that's the 644,000.
That is the 644.
Okay. Senator Pan, then Senator Roth, and Senator Nielsen.
Okay, so I hear, so I hear what you're trying to say, but I'm also concerned about this. So what happened is that we have this grid, and counties have been making this arrangement with the state for years. And the original language, because what we're doing is we're modifying the original language in the code, which I'm not sure when exactly was initially passed. Probably when they first made those arrangements. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not an attorney. I'm not sure when they changed the code. But what I feel like is that we're changing the rules of the game midway. That what happened is the state, probably whoever authored this original language way back when, there's an agreement with the counties. Again, if someone can correct my legislative, this is my assumption on the legislative history. I don't know for sure. But I think there's a very good reason why they put shall when they originally wrote this language here. And I can't imagine that, well, maybe you can, but when the agreement was made with the counties for this, that there was an agreement that, okay, we do the land and we will, and actually, people probably said yes, because the $7 million is accumulated over many years. I mean, it's not that much each year. And suddenly, and I realize that there's times when we have, but we also have agreements we make. And I do think that while certainly I appreciate the desire for more flexibility, I also think there's a question of trust and good faith that I'm getting concerned that we're not respecting, that somebody made agreement before I ever got elected to the legislature. And I don't know if maybe people have been here for more long-standing may remember, but I feel like that this is going back on an agreement that are agreements that were made in the past. And perhaps if the counties come up and say, you know what, actually we're fine with the change, that'd be different. But I'm not hearing, and maybe they're here, oh, okay, well, maybe, again, appropriate time we'll hear from them. But I do feel that for even frankly, such a small sum of money, and given the fact that the administration wants to act in good faith by declaring their intention to pay it, that changing this language actually signals the opposite. And I'm not sure why we would do this. I mean, otherwise, why would people want to make agreements with the state in the future?
Hello.
This is one where there was decisions made many years ago, over 10 years ago, that the legal interpretation was that it was discretionary and subject to appropriation by the legislature. The legislature for many years did not appropriate any money for this program. Our proposal this year is to really wipe that history kind of clean and start afresh, realizing that the payment in lieu of taxes is an important supplemental payment to counties that have lands in conservation and owned by the state. And the commitment is to fund it in the budget year and going forward, but there is not an interest in creating a new liability that the state would be faced with the next time there's a downturn.
So just one quick, because you mentioned a decade ago there was some sort of decision. Was that a court decision or an agreement between the state and the county? What was where was this decision made that this was actually discretionary?
I think the decision was made between the then administration and the legislature, who did not fund it for many years going forward.
Okay, so this is within the state government, admittedly not with the counties or through a court. Okay, all right.
That's correct. And so this language, in our minds, clarifies the ambiguity that may exist about the nature of these payments.
Senator Roth.
Well, I'm trying to understand this. I mean, I'm looking, of course, we're doing this on the fly, which is always a good way to do it, but In looking at something that's called the Legislative Council's Digest, it says existing law regulates real property acquired, blah, 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 and requires the Department of Fish and Wildlife, blah, 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 to annually pay to the county in which the property is located an amount equal to the county taxes levied upon the property at the time it was transferred to the state. So I look at the word existing law requires to annually pay. And then I look at the language in the text of section 1504, and it says the department shall pay annually to the county in which the property is located. Now you go down to sub C, and it says payments provided by this section shall only be made, I guess that's the operative word, from funds, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I see a distinction between a debt and a payment. And I don't understand the interpretation that indicates that the entire obligation is discretionary. We have payment obligations all the time that we can't meet, and we defer them. And I think that's the issue here. Now, I'm certainly not a lawyer anymore, and I'm definitely not ledge counsel, but I think there's a real problem here, and I've got a problem with the proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.